Beef Market Update with Ann Wasko on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Haney Farms. It's time for another episode of the Beef Market Update on RealAgriculture.com, and right now I am joined, as always, by Ann Wasko. Ann, how's it going today?
I'm good, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. It's hot out, but it is windy. It's all that moisture we got, and I fear that it's going to be going away here very quickly with this wind.
Well, it is a nice day, though. We'll take it for that.
Yeah, well, I guess with the wind also came a big pop in the U.S. cash market for live cattle. What's going on?
Well, we had a great close late Friday, the U.S. market, and we figured the market would be a bit stronger, but it was stronger than I think most people thought. So in the south, down in Texas, Kansas, we had the market up $3 to $128 U.S., and the northern markets, Nebraska, Colorado, Iowa, actually got $5 or $6 increase, and they traded fat cattle on late Friday, up over 130 to 132.5. So a nice pop to the market. The cattle feeders in the U.S. are very current, and I think that's showing up. We're still in that great demand period of the spring. Yes, we've come through U.S. Memorial Day and, of course, our Victoria Day, but we've still got, which is considered a very good beef holiday or weekend, if you will, is Father's Day coming up right around the corner. So cutouts, wholesale prices are holding firm as we head into retailers and food service operators buying for that day ahead of us.
Well, I was reading an article by Greg Henderson of Drovers this morning, and he reports that this is the third week in a row now of profits for the U.S. cattle feeder. But before we get too excited, that's after 17 straight months of losses. So a pop in the U.S. cash market is something that is late coming for some, but much needed. Yes,
certainly taken quite nicely with what margins are doing right now. And again, there's what happens. You go into that long period of losses, and cattle feeders over the last many months in both countries have been back in the feeder market, getting feeder cattle back down to levels where they could see some profits again. So finally, U.S. cattle feeders are into that inventory, and Canadian cattle feeders, depending on what class of cattle you're talking about, are getting closer to that point as well. So.
Okay, so
it's the trend that happens, yeah.
Yeah, and hey, sometimes the trend is your friend. Boy, that's corny. But that's the U.S. cattle feeder situation. What about the P&L for the Canadian cattle feeders? Does that look different right now?
Well, of course, the losses didn't start quite as soon. If you go back to 2015, but once they in the late summer of 2015, the losses have been pretty deep and horrendous here for Canadian or Western Canadian cattle feeders since. So margins still on your average closeout are considered negative today. But again, as I suggest, we're getting closer to that period. The numbers are narrowing, and maybe starting to see some black dollar closeouts as we head into closeouts later this summer.
Just in time to get all excited about the feeder run in the fall, right?
Well, although, it was a long, ugly winter of losses, I don't know how quickly the cattle feeder is going to forget that one.
No, and I think everybody's sort of looking and interested in terms of where that market's going to be compared to the prior 2 years. But last time we talked a little bit about pasture conditions. What did you find out?
Well, of course, that was 2.5 weeks ago when we talked, and there's been some great rains in that time frame especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but certainly Western Canada. So that has changed and improved conditions immensely, in all areas. I think, the last report, we haven't seen today's update, but the last report from last week in the U.S. for pasture and range conditions, 66% good or excellent. That doesn't mean anything much till you compare it to last year. It was 61%, and we thought last year was a great year for U.S. pasture conditions. Compared to the 10-year average at this point in time, it was 53%. So long story short, Sean, U.S. conditions, pasture conditions for U.S. cow-calf producers, extremely good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just down in Washington over the weekend, and a lot of hay cut and baled already, and looks, based on the amount of bales in the field, looks pretty good. Good volume as well.
A good one. Yeah. So that's good. And again, the next thing that discussion leads us to is, what are ranchers doing with heifers? And I think we're still looking at the evidence from last year with Canadian heifer slaughter still being down 8% this year. That's still that confirmation of last year. We do feel there was heifers, kept back. The concern this year, the big question mark still is, what about this year's heifer crop? And of course, you've had interviews with Brian from Canfax talking about more heifers in feedlots today, possibly indicating that they're not back in the herd. So moisture conditions are one thing, but profitability certainly is a factor as well in making that decision.
Well, we were talking about a pop in the cash market. What about there's some things happening with the Canadian dollar as of late as well?
Well, yeah, it's something you simply can't just look at one thing once a month and think you know where you're at. For example, here's the Canadian dollar, and this is really all U.S. news that's driving what's gone on since Thursday. But just in the matter of 2 trading days, we've had a 2-cent increase in the Canadian dollar from 76 to 78 cents. So what's that impact? In an extremely short period of time, at current cattle prices in the U.S. of that 130 U.S. fat steer, that's a $4.00 impact to a Canadian fat steer in the negative direction. So $50 a head roughly gets pulled off Canadian fat cattle based on what's happened with the Canadian dollar. And what drove that action, Sean, was the fact that there was a very poor U.S. jobs report out on Friday and basically sent the U.S. dollar index down, driving the Canadian dollar index up.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ann, we get to do this all the time now over the phone, but we're going to be lucky next week because we actually get to do the beef market update in person.
In person, in Regina.
Yeah, well, where would you rather be in June than in Regina, Saskatchewan for the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Annual Meeting? And we're both going to be there. You're giving a presentation on the beef markets, and I'm actually the MC for the day, which I've done the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. I always love going to that meeting. Chad and the group there are very nice to have me back. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a great agenda, and it's going to be it's always a great group, and it's a lot of fun.
It is. It's a great agenda for sure. Temple Grandin, of course, is on the agenda as well next Monday. So looking forward to it, looking forward to the meeting, the convention, and, of course, seeing you.
Yes, we will have to definitely share a pint and have a good time and also get a beef market update done. And we'll make sure we do it because there has been a few times we've talked about doing it and then we get talking and then time moves on and then we don't do it.
That's right. I can't find you in the bar or something.
I get lost at the pub. Ken, have a great week and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thanks, Sean.